Welcome back to another episode. And today's topic is actually one of my favorites because of my own personal journey and story that I want to share today. And it's simply about remaining teachable and why it's so important as a leader to never think I've arrived, I don't need to grow, I don't need to learn. And when you get there, if you get to that point of what I would call a plateau, that should be like a blinking warning sign on your dashboard of your life. Because the reality is, so much changes, so much is happening in our world that we are trying to keep up all day, every day, it seems like, right? But the reality is that if you are a leader who continues to learn and grow and invest in yourself, I just think that you have an opportunity to truly do something significant, not just with your life, but in your business, for your family, for your community. So it's a personal thing, but it's also bigger than you, right? Like I always say to people in leadership, it doesn't end with you, but it has to start with you. And so this topic today is really important. And just a little bit of a backstory. When I was growing up, I hated to read, much like many other kids. You know, when you're having to read and do things to pass a test or write a paper or whatever the case may be, do a project, we tend to just not like to do basic reading. Now I know there are kids out there who get into different book series and they're kind of have a bent for that, and that just wasn't me. And so for me, reading education outside of what I had to do for class was just never a priority. It was never something that I enjoyed. It was something that I basically avoided at all costs. Fast forward through elementary, middle school, into high school, and I was graduating high school and I was heading off to college. And one of my mentors said to me, Chris, leaders are readers. And it was the thing I didn't want to hear. I was heading off to college. I knew there was more formal education ahead of me for the next 4 years. I knew I'd have to be reading books and doing papers and taking tests and studying and all the things, right? I understood that. I expected that. But that was going to be something I had to do, not something I wanted to do. But when my mentor said that, it planted a seed in my mind, at least, where I started to think about, well, what does that mean? So fast forward even a couple years into college, and I was doing an internship. And as I was leaving that internship, I had somebody give me a book as a gift, and it was John Maxwell's Becoming a Person of Influence. And it was the first book I ever received that truly was something that said, you know what, this is about personal growth. This is about me investing in me, not just trying to write a paper, take a test. And all of a sudden, it set me on a path and a trajectory of personal growth and development that I never would have anticipated or expected up till that point. And so, because of that, I've been a huge proponent of self-leadership, of self-development rather, in your leadership, because it's so critical to becoming a leader worth following, becoming a leader who continues to adapt and be able to adjust to the changing issues of culture as well as in business and in life. And so today, I really want to dig into this because I think this is so critical because as leaders, it's easy to get so busy doing the task of the job, leading, quote unquote, the organization. But just because you're in a position and have a title doesn't mean you're really leading, because if you don't keep growing, you may have authority that's attached to the actual title or position, but you may not have the quote unquote moral authority where people say, you know what, I want to follow that person, that man, that woman, just because they're such a growing leader. They're somebody who I truly admire, and they continue to make themselves better. So the reality is this, is that the best leaders continue to stay curious, stay open, and they focus on continual growth. And I want to dig into that a little bit today because I think that leadership, or rather learning, is a leadership responsibility. Learning is a leadership responsibility because, like I said earlier, things are changing so rapidly in our world today, whether it's because of technology with computers and AI and everything, whether it's because of economic issues in our country or in the world. It doesn't matter. Things are just constantly changing. So the reality is this: we're never going to truly keep up and be on the cutting edge of everything. I'm not saying that that's even a goal to try to chase down, because it's an impossible goal. That goalpost will keep moving farther and farther away from you. at a rapid pace, to be honest. But what I will say is we need to be growing in the areas that matter most to the roles that we have and to the goals that we do have. So, for instance, if you want to be a better leader in an area of sales, then you need to really dig in and grow in that area. If you want to be a better leader in marketing, then you need to do that. If it's executive leadership and administrative duties, then you need to continually growing in that. Whatever the case may be, you need to keep growing in the areas that matter most to your role, to your company's needs, to your team's needs, so that you can stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. Now, you may have to put a lot of things to the side that you don't worry about, and that's okay. But focus on the things that matter most. But choose to be a leader who takes the responsibility to continually learn. Because if you don't, somebody's going to outpace you. Somebody's going to run ahead of you, and people are going to start following them instead of you. And I just encourage you, if you want to be a sustainable leader, somebody who people follow year after year, decade after decade, you have to be a learning, growing leader. So, that being said, you also need to model what you're learning. So, it's one thing to learn and even apply it in your leadership, which you need to be doing on a personal level. But you also need to keep in mind that as a leader, you also have many other people looking to you and looking for guidance in what they should be doing. And so, as they say, more is caught than taught. So, you can tell somebody many things, but what they see you do is really what's going to stick. So, think about that. What are you modeling for people to see? Are you modeling the things that you want your people to be doing? Because if you're not, then guess what? They're likely not going to be doing it. They need to see a living, breathing example of a leader doing the thing that they expect. Are you willing? Are you willing to do the things, the hard work, maybe the non-glamorous work? Are you willing to do the things necessary for success so that your people can see that, can learn from you as they're watching you, and can engage with you as you're doing it so that they can then start to do it. So model what you want. One of my favorite quotes or ideas that I heard years ago at a conference, Craig Groeschel said that instead of asking why won't our people do X, Y, or Z, we need to ask the question, what are we not doing or what am I not doing so my people are doing those things? See, the reality is that we can easily point fingers, but what we need to do first is really look in the mirror. Before you really point fingers at your people, look in the mirror and say, okay, if they're not accomplishing what I've asked them to do or what we need them to do, is there something I've not done? Is there something I've not communicated in a way that is making them move in that direction? You see, modeling is so important. So, are you doing the things that you need to do to be a model for them to pick up on and start emulating in their own work and their own leadership within the organization? Because once again, more is caught than taught. And honestly, people they don't follow what they would call hypocritical leaders. If you tell somebody to do something that you're never willing to do, don't be surprised when they don't want to follow you or don't do the things that you want them to do. They want to make sure that they're following somebody who's actually doing and willing to do the things that you're asking. Now, the caveat to this is you shouldn't be doing everything, but sometimes you need to do it to show them how. And you also need to do it to get back in the trenches so that they know that you're not just kind of up in the ivory tower looking down on the minions to do things without having that experience. I was just having this conversation the other day with some friends about how, even in college, this is a challenge in universities these days, is that some of the professors have been teaching so long in an academic realm and they've been out of practice of actually doing what they're teaching that they lose credibility and they lose trust of students and prospective students because they're like that person they haven't even done the thing they're teaching for the last 5, 10, 20 years. How are they going to teach me when things keep changing so much? So we were talking about how important adjunct professors become because they're living in the trenches doing the things every day that they ultimately are teaching. So the reality is this is a challenge for our society. Head knowledge, academic knowledge isn't enough. We need to see boots on the ground, in person, real life, living examples doing what we need to do. We need those models, okay? All of us need models. That's why mentorship, coaching, training is so important. That's why looking to people who are a few steps ahead of you and what they're doing and saying, okay, I want to do that. So what are they doing that I need to start practicing on my own? So sometimes you just have to kind of copy and emulate what somebody's doing before you innovate into doing it your own way. So that's just a really important part of this because once again, more is caught than taught. And then the other side of this is that if you're not growing, you're not going to ultimately be able to multiply your impact and your influence in your organization. Because here's the thing, you need to have something to pass along. So for instance, common example, right? If you're in an airplane, before they take off, the flight crew goes over the spiel and they say, put your own oxygen mask on yourself before you help someone else. If you're not taking care of yourself first in that situation, you can't help other people. Well, the same is true when you're talking about developing others and strengthening your organization. If you're not developing yourself, if you're not growing yourself, then you're going to be hindered at minimum to actually help develop other people and equip them for success. So think about that. What area are you wanting more results out of, but you're not getting? And then think about, well, am I doing what I need to do in order for them to do what I'm wanting them to do? If you're going to be able to pour into someone else, you have to first pour into your cup, right? Pour into your cup so that it can overflow into the lives and into the leadership of other people, because this is critically important. So once again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, the best leaders never really arrive. One of the things I realized in my own journey was when I got to this point where I said, you know what, I hope someday that I'm that old wise sage in my 80s and 90s where I'm continuing to learn and grow and I can share stories of things that I experienced and things I learned along the way and be able to give back to the generations following me. And it felt like a funny thing to aspire to when I was in my 20s when this really kind of hit me. But what I think it was coming from was the place of I don't ever want to stop growing. I don't ever want to stop being a learner and investing in myself and making sure that I'm continuing to pour into me so I can give to others. And as a leader, I believe that we all have this responsibility. Now, once again, I think that you have to be selective in your learning sometimes, where there's just time, restraints that you have to be careful of, where you're saying, look, I need to only focus on maybe one thing at a time right now. I'm very busy with a lot of projects or a lot of appointments or whatever it may be. That's understandable. I'm not saying you have to, study the entire library in your community. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is keep learning, keep growing, keep up leveling your skills and your knowledge so that you can then lead better, be a better model, and ultimately multiply that impact because when you're growing, you actually have something to pass along. You have something to give. As parents, we share a lot with our children of lessons we've learned throughout our lives. As leaders, we need to do the same thing for our employees, our team members. We have so many opportunities on a day-to-day basis to teach and train and help people get better. But we also have to make sure that we're invested in ourselves. And some of that is blocking out time and doing your self-education when it may not feel convenient to you. For me, when I first started my business in 2015 and I was joining the John Maxwell Leadership Program and getting certified as a coach and learning, I realized I had to rearrange my schedule to get done what I wanted to get done. And so I've shared this story before, but I used to be a night owl where I'd stay up late and I would read in the evening, but I realized with the age of my kids and the life stage we were in, I had to do something different. And so for me, I did the hard work of flipping my schedule and becoming a morning person. And now I love my mornings. I love my morning quiet before the day gets busy so I can pray, I can read, I can think, and I can just get ready for the day. There's so much that I've learned and how much I've grown in those quiet morning hours that I just wasn't going to be able to do if I stayed the course of my previous pattern of how I, lived on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's you need to maximize maybe your lunch break, or sometimes it's you just need to block time on your schedule in the middle of the day at a different point in time that's protected. Make sure it's for you. Whatever. I'm not saying that you have to get up at 5 a.m. I'm not saying you have to stay up late. I'm not prescribing. I'm suggesting that you find the time that works for you. Block out 30 minutes to an hour consistently. For me, it's a daily thing now because I love to read. I love to grow. But maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's a couple times a week that you do that. Maybe it's, 3 times. I don't know. Whatever it works for you, start. Start with one thing. And if it's 10 minutes, start with 10 minutes. If it's 20, start with 20. If it's an hour and you have the capacity and the stamina to do that, then do it. But focus on your self-development so that you can then have something to pass along to others. See, in my magnetic leadership system that I coach and train in, there's really 4 phases that I've really refined and honed in on that I think are so critical for any individual as well as a company to really focus on as leaders. First is lead yourself. Lead yourself. That's what we're talking about today. Personal growth is a lead yourself activity. So you need to lead yourself well so that you can then lead others well, which is phase two. Because if you're not leading yourself well, then you're not going to ultimately lead others well. So phase one, lead yourself. Phase two, lead others. Phase three is when you build culture. So when you're leading yourself and leading others well, you start to build a culture that's healthy and thriving, and you can adjust and make sure that things that maybe aren't great in your culture get fixed and are better. And then ultimately, phase four is about multiplying your impact. So when you've built that culture and you're leading others well and you're continuing to lead yourself well and invest in yourself, then you're able to multiply your impact because now you have so much more to give. It's not just about helping one person or two people. Now it's helping multitudes of people. And I talk about that in my training about how do you scale your growth? Well, the quick answer is choose to invest in one person at first and just start practicing. But once you get good at that on the one-on-one level, pick 3 people that you're going to mentor. Choose to mentor 3 people to help them grow in a specific area that you're growing in or that you are an expert in, that you've been doing maybe for decades, even in some cases. But pick 3 people and choose to mentor them over 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it may be, and show them the way, teach them, help them, and give them experiences where they can model after you and learn from you. But then challenge them to do the same for 3 more people. So you're mentoring 3, and then you challenge those 3 people to mentor 3. Here's what's really cool about this process. You're at one person, you're mentoring 3, that takes you to 4 of you now. But when those 3 people invest in 3 people, that's 9 more people. Now you're at 13 people within just 2 generations of mentorship. One person mentors 3, 3 people mentor 9 more. This is where it starts to scale. And then those 9 start to do it again and again and again. So now you can start to see how this can truly multiply. But none of that matters if you're not continuing to grow yourself. Because what happens is you can multiply the wrong things. You can multiply problems if you're not careful. So this is why I want to focus today, not so much on that multiplication piece, which is critically important to an organization for growth and longevity, but to start, you need to be a leader worth modeling after. You need to be a leader that somebody should actually replicate. It's kind of like if you're producing products and the mold of a product is bad, you want to stop that production as soon as possible to fix that so that it's not reproduced thousands of times over. Well, the same thing is true with leadership. If you're not being a great leader, if you're not being a growing leader who can pass on really helpful information and skills to the next person, then you need to pause. You need to work on yourself first, lead yourself well, grow, and then you can then kind of restart production where you're passing it on to 1 more person or 3 more people or multiples. But you don't want to multiply bad behavior, bad habits, lack of learning, all these things that if you're not a growing leader, you would multiply. Because here's what's going to happen. Even though it would be your fault in that case, you're going to be very frustrated with everybody else down the line. But the reality is, if you start with developing yourself, if you commit to personal growth, you can then pass that on to other people and you'll be thrilled at the outcome because now you've got basically an army of people who have multiplied behind you because you've invested in a few who invested in a few who invest in a few, and it starts to scale. So, as we wrap up, Don't get into the mindset, don't fall into the trap of thinking that you've arrived. Think differently. Say, I know that maybe I've reached a level of success. There's a lot of things I know, there's a lot of things I've experienced, but I need to keep growing. And by knowing that, I'm going to invest in myself so I can share with others. Because if you're going to remain teachable, if you're going to be a kind of person that can truly share and pass on and mentor others, it starts with you. It doesn't end with you, but it certainly has to start with you. Hey, if you need help with this for yourself or you want to put together a program for your team, I encourage you to go to McClureCoaching.com where you can schedule and apply for a strategy session where we'll talk about where are you, what are your goals, what are your challenges, and what's the plan to move forward. We can talk about that on a personal level. We can talk about that on a team level and organizational level, whichever and wherever you need help. I'm more than happy to schedule that free call with you, kind of get a feel for where you are and how to help you think about where to go from there. And then if there's courses and programs that I offer that I can help you with, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. But don't hesitate to reach out if you're saying, Chris, I just don't even know maybe where to begin. So I just need to kind of talk through. Go to McClureCoaching.com, click the button to apply for a free strategy session, and we will schedule a time to chat about whatever it is that you're wanting to work on. So remain teachable. Don't think that you've ever arrived and focus on saying, I am going to be a growing leader all the days of my life, whether I'm working professionally or for my family, my relationships, my community, whatever it may be. Keep getting better every single day because you're committed to the process of growth. And that's really what it is. It's a process, it's a journey. So take care, God bless, and we will see you next time.